name is Damon Stevens, and I'm a senior at Shortridge High School. I'm involved in peer mentoring, and I'm the current co-president of the Shortridge GSA. Today I'll be introducing our guest speaker, Ashley Toruño. Ashley is a community engagement and policy advocate at the ACLU of Indiana. The American Civil Liberties Union, or ACLU, is dedicated to defending individual rights and enhancing and preserving liberties that are guaranteed in the U.S. and Indiana constitutions and civil rights laws. It was originally established in 1953 as the Indiana Civil Liberties Union, and the ACLU of Indiana adopted its current name in 2006. Mr. Toruño is a graduate from Indiana's University School of Public and Environmental Affairs and has dedicated her career to nonprofit advocacy. Born and raised in central Indiana, Ashley is a first-generation American and comes from a family of resilient Nicaraguan immigrants. Inspired by her family, instilled in Ashley lies profound motivation to fight against injustice. Ashley deals with immigration and fights against injustice. She and the ACLU work to deal with the defense of the rights of women, minorities, students, immigrants, individuals of the LGBTQ+ community, and more. This relates to our values at Shortridge because Ashley and her line of work are also relevant to the clubs and opportunities offered at our school. Said opportunities include the Black Student Union, the Shortridge GSA, the Shortridge National Organization of Women, and even more clubs that work together to fight injustice in our community. The speaker series on social justice and civic engagement also relates to our mission as an IB World School and the IB Learner Profile traits, because as future leaders, we need to learn to get rid of these barriers and ensure that everyone is treated equally, with love and respect. And we hope that you, the student body, will understand that message today and continue to support the cause. Thank you.
Hi, Shortridge. Thank you all for having me as part of your virtual learning and your World Changing 101 series. I'm so excited to talk to you all about our work at the ACLU and connect with you all virtually. So first, I'd like to acknowledge that I know times are strange and difficult right now, especially because I'm coming to you, talking to you all in this way. But I always find a lot of comfort knowing that we all have ways to be the change we want to see in the world, and we can always fight for justice in plenty of ways. We can still do that in these times. So that's going to be the focus of my conversation with you all today, and just wanted to kick us off acknowledging that. So thank you again for having me, and I look forward to our conversation today. So that's just what our conversation today will be focused on today, is how change starts with you. So we're all in relationship with one another, with our communities and our political processes. So first, to give you a little bit of background on us and me, I'm Ashley, like I mentioned, or like it was mentioned, and I'm our community engagement and policy advocate. I work on our advocacy team here at the ACLU of Indiana. And so the American Civil Liberties Union is a nationwide organization with affiliates in every state, dedicated to defending our rights and defending our rights. So in a nutshell, we sue the government and hold them accountable. So you might be familiar with our work in a variety of issue areas to protect our civil liberties, ranging from immigrants' rights to reforming our criminal justice system, LGBTQ rights, voting rights, and much more. So we do that in mostly three ways. We're in the streets, we're in the state house, we're in the courtroom. We educate the public on issues that we're working on, and we advocate for our civil liberties to our elected officials. And like I mentioned before, we sue the government. So fighting for justice is what we've been dedicated to for the last 100 years. And really that's what we'll be dedicated for the next 100 years. So we're here as a resource and to fight together with the community. So before I continue, I just wanted to take some time for you all to think about a time where you saw injustice for the first time. When was that, and how did you use your voice to change that? When did you fight for justice for the first time? So I'll give you a second to think about that really quick. So that's exactly what we're here to talk about today, is to talk about the power of community. So people powered movements are about becoming part of movements bigger than yourself and generating change. You know, it all really starts with one person and one group. So that can be you, because we are all part of something bigger than ourselves. That can be student organizations, clubs, sports, churches, any group you're involved in, no matter how big or small. So when you think about your involvements, also think about what motivated you to join those groups, or what motivates you to stay involved. Think about the values that brings you together with your community, because we're already all in community with one another. So people-powered movements might be seen primarily as a large protest or a large rally, but all of those rallies and protests and big movements like that start with one-to-one personal relationships. So the impact starts where, you know, in those one-to-one relationships where you can learn, grow, and educate one another, which is something we can all do all the time. Like I said, we are all in relationship with one another. So the frameworks of community organizing starts with recognizing and owning your own power. So there's different types of power that I like to focus on when talking about community organizing. There is individual power. So this can be looked at as, you know, you have your own individual power as a student. If you have a job as an employee, as a member of your club, you all are residents of Indianapolis. You all live in Indianapolis, so that's your individual power as a person in your community. And then you have collective power. So as you know, that can be your class, that can be your grade, or your, if you're working, your work team, or student organization, or relating to, you know, you as a resident of Indianapolis, your neighborhood, what neighborhood you live in. And then thinking about institutional power could be your school. So your entire school as a whole, your entire city as a whole, city of Indianapolis, or your entire state as a whole, state of Indiana. That's your institutional power. You have that in common with those other people in those groups. So those are the types of power that we all hold in one way or another. And then how you build on that power is how I like to break it down into this this equation we see here on the screen. So you have your energized people, plus your opportunity for change, plus your organizing and your leadership, so your organizers. And with those three things, you have a lot of power to win. And you really can't have one without the other, right? So without organizing and leadership, you really only have an opportunity and a lot of energized people. So what does that translate to? It translates into big mob of people with nowhere to go. And then without energized people, you have opportunity and you have organizers, but you don't have the energized people, so you have a long meeting. So that's all to say that it all really builds on one another. You really need all pieces of the puzzle, and that's why the work of organizers is so important. The work of staying involved and staying engaged and staying connected to those organizers is so important, because that contributes to the energized people. And it is also so important to have that opportunity. So finding that opportunity to really make your voices heard. So it's hard to build on collective power without first recognizing and claiming your own power. So that's the first step, is really starting with yourself and to think about how powerful you feel about the issues you care about, and what you can do to change that, who you can connect with, who you can work with, who you can get together with in order to start seeing the change you want to see. So now let's shift our focus to lay the groundwork to prepare for the fight for social change within our state legislature. So that is the Indiana General Assembly, which you might be familiar with. Maybe you're learning about this in some classes, or maybe you've learned it recently, or maybe you haven't. There's a wide range. I think I speak to a lot of different groups of all ages, and I can tell you that we're all on different levels when it comes to knowing about our elected officials. So this is just kind of going to lay the groundwork for everyone. So our Indiana General Assembly is the body that represents Indiana. So just like Congress, if you're familiar, just like Congress represents the U.S., the Indiana General Assembly is the body that represents Indiana. So the body of legislators is divided into two chambers. We have our Indiana Senate and our Indiana House of Representatives. So you can see photos there of their chambers at the State House. So unlike Congress, our state legislature serves part-time. So that means they are in these chambers for the first few months of the year. And our state Senate is divided by Indiana's population. So we have, a lot more senators in our General Assembly than we do in our it's divided differently than how we do in Congress. It's divided by population. So up next, we're going to test your knowledge with some trivia. So please get a piece of paper or somewhere to write down your answers. I'll give you all a second to do that, and we'll start with our first question. So how many senators are in the Indiana General Assembly? Give it your best guess and write that first answer down. All right, on to the next trivia question. How many are Republican? So how many Republican senators do we have in the Indiana General Assembly? Go ahead and give it your best guess. Then on the flip side of that, how many are Democrats? How many Democrat state senators are in the Indiana General Assembly? And lastly, how long are their terms? How long are they in office before they have to run for re-election or let someone else run for the election? All right, I'll give you a second to review all your answers. And let's see what you got right. So for the first question, there are 50 senators in the Indiana General Assembly, 50 senators from across the state, and 40 of them are Republican and 10 of them are Democrats. So that goes to show that we are in a supermajority or a majority Republican state Senate. And their terms are 4 years. So let's see how you do on the House side. So we're going to go through the House questions. So write your answers down and then we'll review the answers. So starting with, how many members are in the House of Representatives? Give it your best guess and see, and then we'll see your answers. All right, same question. How many are Republican? Write down your best guess or your answer that you know is right. And then how many House members are Democrats? And lastly, same question, how long are their terms? I'll give you a second to review all your answers, and we'll go ahead and do our last round of trivia answers. Alrighty, so there are 100 members in the House of Representatives. So if you got that answer right, go ahead and give yourself a round of applause. And there are 67 members that are Republican and 33 that are Democrats. So again, we're in a majority Republican House of Representatives as well. They serve for 2-year terms. So unlike the Senate, where the Senate's 4 years, in the House, every 2 years is when their terms are up. And that, again, is a photo of the House chambers. So hopefully you got a lot right. And if you got them all wrong, no worries. That's where I would be before I did all this work. So we're all at different levels, and it's totally, this is to help you learn some more. So hopefully you learned something from that trivia. Great, so continuing on to some overview of the General Assembly. Like I said, they're really similar to the federal level legislature, which is Congress. Our state has 3 branches of government, just like the federal government, where we have our legislative, executive, and judicial branches. The General Assembly serves as the legislative branch, and it checks and is checked by the other branches. Our state legislators' main role is to, create and vote on bills to govern Indiana. And each legislator serves on assigned committees, which the committees is where the bills are assigned to, which we'll go through that in a second. And in committee, a lot can happen. A lot of changes to bills that are introduced. A lot of changes and a lot of public input happens during committees. So this next slide is to give you an overview of key committees for civil liberties that us at the ACLU take a close look at. For all of our reforms to our criminal legal system, we look at the corrections and criminal law and courts and criminal code committees, both in the Senate and in the House. And then also for, voting rights work, we look at the elections committee, and so on and so forth for all the other issue areas we work on. So it can vary from, from different committee to different committee. It all looks a little bit different in where bills are assigned to. And that's where I'll go into on how a bill becomes a law. So you might have seen the video, A Bill on the Hill, that is, it goes back and forth, and finally can become a law. And that's the same process we have here in Indiana. A bill is introduced, it begins with an idea. It can come from community groups, come from individuals talking to their lawmakers. It can come from, big organizations pushing for different types of laws to be introduced, but they're all introduced by legislators. So they draft and introduce the bills depending on what issues they're looking to address. And then it goes to the first reading, where the bill receives the bill number, and that's where it is assigned to its certain committee. And once it goes to the committee, it'll have a committee hearing where members debate the bill, hear public testimony, and this is where bills can be altered. And after discussion, say it makes it through this whole process, the bill is still moving, the members vote, and that's where they can either vote for it to continue on or vote for it not to continue on. So once it's approved, the bill moves on, and it passes on to second reading. When it goes on to second reading, the bill is considered by the full House or Senate, and this is when it can start to be amended. And approved amendments, once they're voted on and passed, it's incorporated and then moved on to third reading. And this is when each member has the opportunity to speak on the bill before voting, and a majority vote sends the bill to the opposite chamber where the process is repeated. So say this happened in the Senate, then it goes to the House to go through the same process again. And if there's disagreements when it goes through the House and through the Senate, and the bill looks different when it comes out, that's where it will go to conference committees to figure out, you know, what differences they can agree on, and then have it continue on to the approval process. So the final step is for the governor to either veto it or sign it into law, and that's where how the process goes in a nutshell. But if you haven't seen the Bill on the Hill video, also recommend watching that. This is some stars here to show you times to take action, really good times to take action. So when a bill is introduced and you really either agree or disagree, or would like to see a bill be introduced to address an issue you're seeing in your community, that's a great time to take action, to talk to your lawmakers and talk to them about what they're working on. And like I said, during committee, that's a great time to attend and make your voice heard on issues that they're discussing within committees, because it is a much smaller group, obviously, than either the full House or the full Senate. So great time to take action. Also the conference committees, once there's way more into the process and it's about to become, it's about to either be vetoed, signed into law, or not pass out of conference committee. So there's a lot of action that can happen at that time as well. So this is all some examples of some, action we've had at the State House and ways that you can get involved in future years. With the pandemic, this next legislative session will look very different likely. So these kind of gatherings won't be able to happen, but there still be ways to engage. It'll just look a little bit different. These are just some examples from past few years. So the first being a press conference with the Indiana Undocumented Youth Alliance and Cosecha, Indiana, to push for driver's licenses for all. So for undocumented immigrants to have access to driver's licenses. And that's still a really, really prevalent issue that we're going to continue to fight on and keep getting support on. So that's an issue that you can talk to your legislators about if that's an issue you want to fight for immigrants' rights. The second one is the LGBTQ State House Day, the first ever we've had in Indiana's history. We hosted it this past legislative session. So this was an amazing day to bring lots of LGBTQ rights advocates to the State House and speak on issues that face the LGBTQ community. So that'll hopefully happen again in the future. If it looks more virtual, obviously we'll shift and do that. So look out for that. And the last is a rally for voting rights on the Capitol steps. So that's a picture of, this gives you some photos from the inside, the outside, lots of ways to stay involved in the process. And like I said, our legislature is part-time, right? So this is during the first few months of the year, either January through March or January through April. So we have long legislative sessions and short legislative sessions. So this year's 2019, it's an odd number year. So we had a short session where they don't discuss the budget. But on even number of years, they are long sessions. So that's when they do discuss the budget, and it runs from January till end of April. So that's what this next year will look like. And here are some resources to learn more and to kind of review everything we've talked about today. Is aclu-in.org/legislation. This is where we have our activist toolkit. We have a link to find your legislators if you don't know who they are. And also our bill tracker. Our bill tracker is what we keep updated during the legislative session to give you a summary of bills that we're looking at, that we're working on, and to learn more about it and what our position on them are. And so you can filter them by issue area, and you can learn more about what's going on in our legislature. Then if you'd like to learn more about the General Assembly directly, this is their website, iga.in.gov. And what I have circled there is upcoming meetings. This is where you can see what meetings are coming up, what committee hearings might be coming up. So this is an important place to look during the legislative session to see what's going on. Right now, there's interim study committees that'll be happening soon, so you can learn about different topics that legislators are studying and looking at before the legislative session. So you can learn more about those there. Right there at the top where it says information, there's the Find Your Legislator tab as well. And then it's a really user-friendly website, so you can learn more about it that way. And the Watch Live area towards the bottom here, that's in yellow, that's where you can watch live what's happening at the state or at the State House. So that's a really great way to stay involved too, to watch what's happening live virtually. So up next, I'm going to talk about ways to take action as well, and how taking action at the State House can look. Like I said, it can look a lot of different ways. Here's some photos of some rallies we've had on the steps of the State House. Maybe you've attended one yourself where you were on the steps of the State House, or if you haven't, you will in the future. I think it's a great way to have your voice be heard on issues you want to fight for. So one way you could do that is by contacting your representatives. So attending a third house meeting, so a town hall meeting, looking out for those in your community to talk directly to your legislators. You can host, letter writing or postcard writing parties. This photo we have here is when we got a lot of folks together to write to their members of Congress to fight against family separation. And a lot of them brought, their younger siblings or their children, and they did their own kind of letter writing with this coloring banner. So that was lots of fun. And so you can make these contacting your rep really a group effort, and by making calls or encouraging others to do the same with you. When you do it all in community, you can review each other's letters, you can give each other templates, you can make the process less daunting, because it can be daunting for, it can be intimidating to call sometimes or to write. So that's one way to do it. Also attend rallies and protests. Like I said, right now there's not, it's not always the safest to to congregate, but if you're wearing masks and you're doing it safely and whatever you feel comfortable doing, just making sure you know your rights before you attend a rally and a protest, to educate yourself and take action. And that's our link right there, aclu.org/know-your-rights, where we have plenty of resources for you to know what your rights are at a protest, to make sure your rights aren't being violated. There's lots of information on other topics as well at that link, so it's a great way to go to really equip yourself with your rights. And another action you can take is going to the State House directly. This is a photo of a committee hearing where we had lots of folks come out to have their voices be heard. And obviously now this is going to look differently, and how that will look will depend on what's happening. But either way, there's always live streams of the committee hearings, so you could gather have lots of folks come together to do watch parties, either virtually or in person if possible. So that's a great way to generate some action to to hear what legislators are saying and how they're discussing issues, and if you agree or disagree, to contact them. And so more resources for you is, like I mentioned earlier, our 2 links to learn more about what we've talked about today. And then updates on social media. The hashtag #IamLegis on Twitter is a great way to stay connected with either reporters that are reporting on issues or different advocacy organizations that are following these issues closely. There's a lot more activity on social media for up-to-date things that are happening, and great ways to stay involved that way. I encourage you all to follow us on social media at ACLU Indiana on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected to the issue areas we work on, and ways to stay involved with our work. It's great way to just learn about issue areas, because we're always doing that public education through our social media as well. So right now, this is kind of the end of all the information I have for you today. It's mostly just to open it up for questions, but I know that that can't happen virtually in our setting right now. So really encourage you to reach out to my email there with any questions you might have. If you'd like to volunteer with our work, we are always open to that and always welcome to having more people involved in our work that way. If you go to our website, which you see right there, which is aclu-in.org/volunteer, that will take you straight to our volunteer application, or really our volunteer form, where you can help us learn a little bit more about you and ways you want to get involved in our work, and learn more about ways to fight for issue areas you're really passionate about. Also, at that aclu-in.org, you can sign up for our email alerts, where we keep people updated on the issue areas we're working on, any events that we'll have. We'll have some virtual events coming up. So it's a great way to stay involved and stay engaged in the process or stay engaged in our work, and throughout the legislative session, staying engaged with the legislative process. So that will kick off January through April of this next year. So and things are happening before then. Things are happening now, and always happening. So if you don't know who your legislator is, highly encourage you all to use those links I mentioned before at iga.in.gov to learn who your legislators are, what they're working on, and how they can hear from you, because that's their job, to serve you, and you that's how you can stay engaged in the process. So like I said, reach out to me please at atoruno@aclu-in.org. I always love to talk to students, and I always love to talk with anyone who just wants to get more involved in their community. So please reach out to me. And thanks again for having me. Have a good one, everyone.